Hello. Right, welcome folks. Jack here from Peach Guitars. Welcome to a live stream. Now, you'll notice this is a very different live stream setup than you may have seen me do in the past. Recently though, John's done some excellent live videos on this platform and you can see all kinds of cool things around me. You can see some text, I think, somewhere. You can see our banner, all kinds of information. Now, this is going to be all about the new Fender American Vintage 2 guitars, and very helpfully, because I'm not good at specs, as you may have known from watching our videos in the past, we're going to have Aidan, one of our product specialists, in the live chat. So if you've got any questions that you want me to answer in this video, I'll do my best, but he's the man who knows all. So if you check the live chat as we go on, and probably some of the pinned comments on the video afterwards, if you're watching this when it's not live, you'll be able to see the answers to your many questions. So keep the questions coming in. But really, I'm just going to kind of offer up some thoughts, because you may have seen a whole barrage of different no talking, just tones videos with these guitars. And I think we played pretty much every model of this new series that we had at the time. I think I got my hands on almost every single one. And we also did a little bit of a feature video talking about kind of the basic specs and what now differentiates the new American Vintage 2 from its outgoing predecessor, the American Original series. And really, as I said in that video, this is kind of the one that the Fender purists are most particular and precious about, because, as the name implies, this is where Fender leans back heavily onto their heritage. And the original American Vintage series, I remember when that came out, and it was an absolute phenomenal line of guitars, because they were really kind of knocking on the door of custom shop level quality, but without the custom shop level price. And so this is really the one that Fender fans have been rooting for. So then it went to the American Original series a few years on, which kind of consolidated, whereas the original American Vintage was all about year-specific models, so like I can't remember what there was exactly, but I think there's a 54 Strat, for example, 52 Tele, that kind of thing. Then it got consolidated in the American Original series just to a 50s Strat and a 60s Strat and so on. And now with the Vintage 2, they've brought it back to the year-specific format. So what I've got right here is a 1963 Telecaster. And I'm going to show you a couple of guitars in this video. I'm not going to go too in-depth, but just a couple of my favorites. You may be able to see just over my shoulder there, got a few guitars lined up in the rack. There's some Strats and a Tele, another Tele too. So the American Vintage 2, as I've alluded to, is kind of the vintage favorite, but none of that matters a jot unless it sounds good. So I'm going to show you how it sounds very quickly. What I've actually done, get this for technology, okay? So live stream 101, keeping it dead simple, and it's all Fender based. So I've got down here on the floor, which you probably won't be able to see. but it's just behind me down there. I've got the Tone Master Fender Deluxe Reverb amp. XLR straight out of the back into our live streaming software, and I'm using the cab sims on board the Tone Master Deluxe. So really, if you get one of these guitars and you get one of those amps, or maybe you already have one of those amps, it's going to sound exactly like this. I'm not going to use any effects for the moment, just to show you the nice clean tone. Got it cranked up a little bit, but it's still pretty clean. And not only does that sound like a vintage Deluxe, this sounds very much like a really open, wiry, beautiful, succulent vintage Telecaster. Let's check it out. Okay, so a little bit of each of the different pickup selections. So for those who don't know anything at all, so we're going to just go complete 101 here for just a second. When I'm saying that these are the most vintage kind of comparable series of guitars that Fender makes, that's basically because the current USA lineup is actually a little bit complicated, and we have done videos on this in the past. So if you're interested to find out more, after you've done with this live stream, there'll be hopefully some links either down in the comments or in the description we'll put in afterwards, linking to kind of an overview of the different American series. So you start out with the American Performer, I believe. Then you go in sort of price order here, at least at the time of filming those videos. Then you went to the Pro 2, then you had the Ultra and the Ultra Luxe, and then you had the American Original at the time of filming those videos, which is now the Vintage 2. So it's, I think, arguably the most expensive model in the USA lineup. Don't quote me on that, because all the info will be on our website if you want to know for sure. But it's right at the top of the tree, and all those other models kind of take influence from the more contemporary directions that Fender have gone throughout the course of several decades, and they've kind of had more modern improvements added to them, different bridges, different pickups, different neck shapes, all sorts of things, different colors even. The vintage is really about what Fender were doing in specifically the 60s, even further back in the 50s, and with the new range, the Vintage 2s, they've actually paid a little bit more attention to the 70s, which was kind of what a lot of people consider to be not the epitome of Fender, but as they've proven with this new series where they've managed to bring so many different models out. You've got a 73, I think, Strat, 72 Tele thin line, which I will show you a little later. There's also a 75 Custom Tele and a 77 Deluxe, I think. So 4 different models of Telecaster, well, three different models of Telecaster and 1 Strat, all from the 70s. So, and they're all completely different, and they're all equally historically important guitars. A lot of famous players have used those guitars. So to say the 70s is Fender's dark period, I don't think really applies anymore, and Fender have proven that now with that series. However, we'll talk about that in a moment, because the 60s and the 50s are really where most people look to get their Fender fix from. So this 63 Tele is kind of everything you would want a Rosewood board Telecaster to be. So you've now got the 7¼ inch fingerboard radius back on most of these guitars. Now I made a mistake in the original sort of release video we did of saying that all of them have that radius. I believe there's one model, I think it's the Tele Deluxe, the 77, or maybe the Custom as well, that don't have that. But basically the radius is period specific. So on this guitar, it is 7 1/4 like it would have been in '63. That's the one thing that splits the most opinions, I think, because people either love that Fender have gone back to what those guitars originally were and they're not messing with it. But if it's not to your taste, suddenly a vintage style Fender is out the window for you. Unless you've played one, because I do think it's one of those things that people just get caught up on, maybe for no good reason sometimes. So the idea is that a 7 1/4 inch radius board is extremely comfortable down the kind of chordal end, you know, because it's nicely rounded off, a little bit more so than more modern, flatter boards are. So it's very comfortable to play chords on this guitar. Even acoustically, you'll be able to tell that it's well intonated down there. For the chords. Now what people kind of struggle with a little bit is when you go up the board, because it remains constant all the way up, and that curvature kind of lends itself to sometimes a little bit of choking out with the higher frets if you're bending strings. But let me demonstrate to you how, if you know how to get around it and you're kind of prepared for it, it's not an issue. Right, let me show you. So hopefully you'll be able to hear there that not only does it not choke out, unless you really throttle the thing, but it's also really well intonated, even all the way up. And with the vintage bridge saddles as well. So you've just got to kind of treat this as a different animal than a modern Fender would be. And I kind of think that kind of goes without saying, but I just wanted to clear that up because a lot of people don't like that based on it being a spec, on a spec sheet. But actually in practice, it doesn't always pan out the way you think. It's just a great vintage feeling guitar, and if you play it in that fashion and appropriate it for that use, it's going to work absolutely fine. So, the other thing I wanted to point out is the pickups. In this particular guitar, they're just calling them American Vintage 2 '63 Tele pickups. So they've gone back once again to the year-specific format, so they're voiced specifically for this model, and they have exactly what you want out of a '60s Tele. They're kind of a little bit more mellow than a '50s would be, and we have played '50s Teles on the channel, so if you're interested to hear those, there'll be plenty of videos of the no talking, just tones. I almost said no playing, just tones. That doesn't make any sense. The no talking, just tones videos, I kind of covered the '50s Tele sound. The '60s, though, is the one for me because it's a little bit more mellow. When you go to the bridge pickup, it gets nice and spanky, and it can kind of do the Robin Ford blues thing. In the middle, it's really funky. It's kind of a little bit more open and quacky. And the neck pickup is really smooth, so it can kind of get a little bit jazzier, a little bluesier if that's your kind of bag. But also, I think maybe it's a psychosomatic thing or a subconscious thing. The radius, now this is one of those things that people on the internet hate when people say. I think the radius adds a little chirp to the tone because your finger kind of catches on the board a little bit more maybe. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to show you each pickup. I'm going to go back to clean, show you those 3 different types of tones I was talking about, and I'm going to try and isolate the chirp. Check it out. Did you hear it? Did you hear the chirp? I was trying to get it in there at the end. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just something in my brain. But there's something about this vintage format and this kind of feel that just seems to have this little extra quality to the tone. Now, that may not be what you want, and that's why Fender makes all those different brilliant ranges like the Pro 2 and the Ultra and so on. And it's not just limited to USA guitars, of course, but if you want that vintage thing, this is just doing what they've always done, but they've just tweaked it a little bit to make it a little bit more player-friendly and to introduce some new models to this existing format. Speaking of which, let's move on from the Tele. I can see in the live chat, by the way, that Aidan is quick-firing answers to all your questions and chucking in links and all this stuff. So if you've got a question, I don't think I even need to do any of this business anymore. I think I just need to play and waffle. Aidan is on the case, but I will check through the questions periodically, and if you've got any that you want me to answer specifically, I will check them and I will do my best. All right, so I want to move on to another guitar. Bear with me 1 second. And before I play another guitar, I want to show you one that I cannot play, which is this. And I wanted to point this out because time and time again, the poor left-handed folks of the world, of the guitar playing world anyway, do often get left out. And that's not fair. You know, sometimes even if they do include left-handed guitars for sale, it's not necessarily the same models, it might not necessarily be the same colors, stuff like that. You do get the raw end of the deal, I'm afraid to say, left-handed players. But Fender haven't pulled any punches here, and we haven't pulled any punches in ordering the models and the specs that you're after. So this is one of the most popular models in this range now, the 57 Strat, left-handed in this gorgeous finish. And I don't even have a right-handed one in stock to play for you. This is all yours, lefties. So if you're that way inclined, and I've learned, by the way, as well, thanks to your comments on these unboxing videos and things in the past, to hold a left-handed guitar the way a left-handed person would hold it. That only makes sense. So if that's the kind of thing you've been looking for, I don't really need to tell you, do I? Just check out the full stock on the website. But I did just want to make a point that they do exist, and they dwell here at Peach Guitars. Right, with that out of the way, let me talk about one that I can play. And I'm pretty sure I have done this guitar in a video, one of the kind of the listing videos, as we call them. 73 Strat. So I was really excited to see that they brought this into the fold at all, because they used to be, now I'm not 100% on my Fender history here, but I remember for the longest time there was the Classic Series 70s model, and I always loved that because I love Blackmore, I love Hendrix, and all those, and Yngwie Malmsteen, all those great players, I've talked about this in the past, that played a 70s or a late 60s era Strat with the big headstock. I was always really excited by that, and then I think it went away. Maybe the Vintera 70s guitar still exists, but for the longest time they never did it for the US lineup. And the American original, again, as far as I can remember, I don't think there was a 70s Strat. So now with the Vintage 2, we got it back, baby. So let me just get this in tune quickly, because I haven't checked this over before I started the live stream. Rookie error there. But the 70s spec, as I was saying earlier, is kind of one that not everybody, it's not their first choice necessarily. But as I play, hopefully you will kind of develop an understanding perhaps, or it may solidify your perspective that these guitars don't work. But I kind of want to suggest that they do a different Strat thing. They do a different side of the Strat coin. It's almost like a new coin, because if 50s and 60s are two different sides of the same coin, this analogy isn't really going anywhere. So let me show you a new Strat coin, in my opinion. Okay, so hopefully a little bit of everything there. I think they're one of the most versatile guitars going, and this is exemplified, in fact, by another video of ours that you may have seen when we did the top 10 Strat riffs. And in that video, I had a gold-coloured, I think it might have been a 69 or a 70, I can't quite recall now, but that guitar kind of did a little bit of everything to cover all those different riffs. So I used a few different Strats in the video, but point being, for any of the rockier stuff, and also any of the cleaner, where you want a real point to the note. In my opinion, 50s does that quite well, but it doesn't necessarily rock up that well. 60s is a little bit more mellow, as was the case with what I was talking about with the Telecaster as well. And the 70s one is kind of the Goldilocks. It's kind of in between, but it's also its own thing. It's very articulate, it's very kind of crystalline in its top end as well. And all of that added together, I don't know, it just works for me. And I'm sure a lot of other people that maybe you hadn't considered a 70s guitar before, because it's always been about the 50s and 60s. The 70s offers a very valid, it's not even an alternative, is it? It's just a slightly different variant on the theme, and it's not just about the colours, and it's not just about the headstock. There's something inherent in the tone, and of course, that is down largely to, once again, the proprietary 73 Strat pickups that are exclusive to this model, so you don't get that, of course, in the 50s or the 60s. So, I think, you know, hopefully that makes the case for the 70s. I feel like this is the underdog, this is always the one that gets kind of crapped on very unfairly and very unnecessarily, and Fender have done a really nice job of bringing it back and kind of paying their respects to the 70s. And of course, the original of this, come next year, is going to be a 50-year-old design, so I reckon the vintage market is going to start catching up to the 70s instruments. I don't know anything about that kind of thing, vintage guitars, but I think the people who do know will start to put their eye on 70s instruments here and there. So maybe soon. They're not going to be as accessible as they were, and this is going to be the logical way to go if you want a flavour of the 70s instrument without having to go to the original. Just a couple of completely useless and completely pointless observations there from me. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of highlight the 70s Strat, but it's not the only 70s guitar. Like I said, this is the real strong case that they're making for the American vintage lineup, seems to be largely about the 70s guitar. So let me just show you one more. Now again, I can't recall if this existed in the American original line or even in the American Vintage 1 lineup, but the 72 Tele thin line is here. So this guitar is very different than the 60s Tele that I showed you earlier on. For a start, the obvious point, it's semi-hollow. It's got a big hole in it. It's also got two wide-range Fender humbucking pickups. So straight away, it's a totally different experience playing one of these guitars, even acoustically like this, because you feel a lot more kind of, you know, a Tele traditionally is a slab of wood with a couple of small microphones placed upon it. This is a totally different experience because it kind of encompasses some of that traditionally G-branded sensibility of using air inside your guitar to kind of, I suppose you just connect with it a little bit more physically because there's actually more physically going on. It's just physics. So it doesn't end there though, because you've got a different neck profile. It's typically a little bit thinner, skinnier. So maybe if the 50s Tele thing hasn't been for you in the past, this might be more up your street. You've also got these very stylish tuners, which are not going to come across on the live stream here at all, but you can check out the images on the website. I really like the design of these tuners, and they're actually quite a bit more comfortable, I would say, sometimes at least, to use than the kind of the more tulip style 50s guitars. They're just more to get hold of if you're in a hurry. Let me show you the tones. Once again, clean. I'll put on a little bit of distortion as well. But you can do a lot with these. Even though they're humbucking pickups, you might have an assumption in your head that, okay, so it's just for drive sounds maybe. Not the case. Check it out. Right, once again, it's kind of a guitar that does a little bit of all styles, if you'll allow it to. And maybe it didn't sound like you expected it to. I don't know, let me know in the comments what you think. But to me, this, once again, the 70s thing has this kind of mid-range point to it, as it did with the Strat and as it does with all the 70s Tele models. There's like this extra emphasis on a different point of the mid-range than Teles traditionally have, which of course is highlighted by and probably contributed to by the semi-hollow nature of the guitar, and of course the humbucking pickups. And I did notice, as comments are flying by in the live chat, talking about the kind of how valid are these wide-range pickups? Are they true cuneiform, as the acronym says, models? Which apparently they are. This is the first time they've done this in a while. That's something to do with the magnetic metallic makeup, I believe, of the pickup design itself. And all I can tell you, I don't know anything about the science, but all I can tell you there is that it definitely speaks in a very open way. Sometimes humbuckers on a bolt-on neck guitar, sometimes it just doesn't work because it doesn't marry up right. In this case though, they're not overpowered, they're really musical sounding. It's actually got about the same level of output, almost, as that Strat did. So it's a very open, dynamic sound, but of course you get a little bit of extra warmth, a little bit of extra roundness, a little less shrill, high frequency response. And you don't have any hum as well. So that's always a nice thing, isn't it? So 3 very different models right there. I think they best sum up what this American vintage lineup is about. It's a return to form, if you're into that kind of thing, the vintage inspired designs. It's also a reintroduction to the 70s models, which I do think are going to kind of start to catch on a little bit more. I know a lot of people already do play them, and a lot of people do appreciate them. Not necessarily people who watch our channel, it seems. It's always about the 50s and the 60s Fenders. But I'd like to see 70s Fender guitars get into the hands of more players. I think it's a cool thing. I think it's different, and it does inspire you to play a little differently as well. I think you have to have your wits about you perhaps a little more. It's less sympathetic to your playing than a 50s or 60s guitar might be in a number of different ways. Like I said, it's about that mid-range point perhaps, and the lower output pickups and the different feeling neck and all these things. It's not quite as forgiving a guitar to play, but I do think it's arguably perhaps a little more rewarding when you do get it right. So hopefully I've covered a lot of stuff there. Before we wrap this up, I do want to answer any questions that anybody has in the comments, so do keep them coming in the live chat. I can see though, Aiden, my man, has been absolutely smashing it out of the park with the replies. So just to reiterate some stuff I said at the start of this, in case you joined partway through, everything you're hearing today is through the Tonemaster Deluxe reverb from Fender, XLR straight out of the amp using the onboard virtual cabinets, straight into live stream land. And I'm using the standard fare of pedals on the floor that are in all the videos. So not much, and really these guitars are all about just doing it from the guitar. You know, you can kind of get a great sound, whether it's a clean sound or a slightly distorted sound. Just use the guitar's controls to great effect, and then maybe boost it up a little bit if you need a little more drive. There's not much to it really, but I do think the American vintage overall is kind of, you know, if that's what you want, this is the best that Fender's going to offer you now. It's also the only guitar in the USA lineup that has a nitro top coat on its finish, nitrocellulose lacquer. All the others are poly-finished, which has its merits. You know, it's more durable, but nitro is, once again, nitro is the fuel that feeds the hearts of Fender enthusiasts and vintage guitar enthusiasts in general. So if that's your thing, this is the only way to get it now in the USA lineup. However, I've been spouting a few facts here that may or may not be true. So if Aidan hasn't already corrected me on certain things, I implore you to check out the specs on our website for yourself. It'll be linked down in the description below, so you can check out the full American Vintage 2 range, the full Fender range by extension, and have all of these claims and probably mostly nonsense facts that I've been spouting. You can verify them all for yourself on the site. I think that's about it. So thank you very much for watching. The great thing about this, compared to the last time I was doing live streams, is that I don't have to end this live stream myself. I've got a guy for that. So I'm going to play you out. Thank you very much for watching. Do drop any other further questions and comments down in the comment section below. But thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you very soon, potentially for another live stream soon, but I hope that you're enjoying what we're doing. If you are, and you're new to the channel, hit subscribe and stay tuned for further content. Anyway, that's enough from me. Have a good evening. See you very soon. Bye-bye.